Kill the soldiers. Leave the nurse. She's useless. He grabbed the wounded soldier by the collar, dragged him across the floor like a piece of garbage, and pressed the barrel directly into his eye socket. Where is the minister? No answer. He pulled the trigger without hesitation, not to kill, but to take the man's ear clean off. The soldier's scream tore through every corridor of Al-Rashid Military Medical Center. The Navy SEALs, America's most elite warriors, were on their knees, disarmed, bleeding, completely helpless. 15 terrorists had taken the most fortified military hospital in Baghdad in under 4 minutes. Nobody was coming to save them. Nobody except the quiet nurse in Ward C who hadn't said a single word yet. If you're new here, subscribe and follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Ava Chen arrived at Al-Rashid Military Medical Center, she carried 2 bags. One held her medical supplies. The other held nothing anyone ever asked about. She checked in at the front desk the way any volunteer would, quietly, efficiently, with a small smile that said she was there to work and not to make friends. The duty officer, a young corporal named Willis, barely looked up from his clipboard. "Nurse Chen," he said, stamping her paperwork. "Ward C, report to Lieutenant Hargrove." He slid her a laminated badge across the counter. She clipped it to her scrubs without a word and walked into the building. That was 3 weeks ago. By now, the staff at Al-Rashid had gotten used to her. She was reliable, quiet, and precise. She never wasted a movement. She never forgot a face. She knew every patient's chart without looking at it twice, and she moved through the wards with a kind of focused efficiency that made the other nurses admire her and the doctors trust her. She was, by every visible measure, exactly what she appeared to be: a dedicated American volunteer nurse, doing good work in a hard place. Nobody noticed that she had memorized the building in her first 48 hours. Nobody noticed that she always sat with her back to the wall. Nobody noticed that when a door slammed unexpectedly down the hall, she didn't flinch the way normal people flinch. She went still, completely, deliberately still, like a woman who had trained herself out of reaction and into readiness. Her name was Ava Chen. She was 34 years old. She had volunteered at 3 overseas facilities in the past 6 years. And before any of that, before the scrubs and the badge and the gentle bedside manner, she had spent 8 years as a Marine combat medic in Afghanistan, 2 of them embedded with a force recon unit in Helmand province, where she had earned a reputation among the men she served with that they rarely talked about in public. They called her Ghost. Not because she was quiet, though she was. Not because she disappeared when you needed her, because she never did. They called her Ghost because of what she could do from 200 yards with a rifle and a clear line of sight. Because in the worst moments, when everything was falling apart and the enemy was closing in, Ava Chen had a way of making threats simply stop existing. One moment a man was raising his weapon. The next moment, he wasn't raising anything, ever again. And nobody had heard a shot. She never talked about it. She never bragged. She came home. She transitioned out of the Corps, and she went to nursing school. She said she wanted to help people. Her former commanding officer, a colonel named Dawson who had seen her work up close, once told a reporter, off the record, that Ava Chen was the most dangerous person he had ever met, and also one of the most compassionate. "That's not a contradiction," he said. "That's just who she is." At Al-Rashid that Tuesday morning, she was changing IV lines in Ward C when she heard the sound. Most people would not have recognized it for what it was. It was subtle, a distant pop, muffled by concrete and distance, followed almost immediately by a second one. To the other nurse in the room, a young Iraqi woman named Fatima, it sounded like a car backfiring in the street outside. Fatima didn't even look up from the chart she was updating. Ava set down the IV bag, very carefully, very slowly. She looked at the window, then at the door, then she checked her watch. "Fatima," she said, her voice completely level. "I need you to lock that door after I leave, and not open it for anyone unless they use the medical staff code. Can you do that?" Fatima looked up now, confused. "What? Why? What's—" "The code is 7741, Ava said. "Don't open it for anyone else. Keep the patients calm and get down below the window line." She was already moving toward the door. "I mean it, Fatima. Below the window line." She didn't wait for an answer. In the hallway, she stopped and listened. The building had changed. It was a subtle thing, something you couldn't measure or describe to someone who hadn't been trained to feel it. But Ava felt it the way a sailor feels a shift in the wind before they can see it in the water. The ambient noise of the hospital, the distant PA system, the rolling carts, the low hum of conversations and machines had shifted. There were voices now that didn't belong, footsteps that moved wrong, too fast, too deliberate, too spread out. She counted at least 4 distinct movement patterns, maybe 6. She turned left and moved toward the service corridor. The service corridor at Al Rashid was the hospital's circulatory system, a narrow, utilitarian passage that connected every ward, every stairwell, every supply room in the building. The administrative staff used it to move equipment without disturbing patients. The cleaning crews used it at night. In 3 weeks, Ava had walked every inch of it, sometimes twice. She knew which sections had working overhead lights and which ones had burned out bulbs that nobody had replaced yet. She knew which doors locked from the inside and which ones only looked like they did. She knew the sight lines. She moved through the corridor quickly, but without running. Running created noise. Running created panic. She had no weapon, not officially, not visibly, and she needed to understand what she was dealing with before she made any decisions she couldn't take back. She heard the first scream when she reached the junction near the east stairwell. It was a man's voice, high and desperate, cut off mid-cry by something heavy and final. Then radio static. Then a voice speaking Arabic, fast, clipped, giving orders. She pressed herself against the wall and slowed her breathing. She had understood about 60% of what the voice said. It was enough. They were sealing the exits. They had at least 1 hostage already, and they were moving toward the VIP ward, the secured floor where a high-ranking Iraqi government minister was recovering from emergency surgery. Ava closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she moved. The supply room on the eastern side of the second floor was supposed to be locked. Ava had noticed 2 weeks earlier that the locking mechanism was worn. The kind of worn that comes from years of being opened in a hurry by people who didn't have time to be careful. She had filed that observation away without consciously deciding to. It was a habit. You noticed things. You stored them. You never knew when you'd need them. The door opened on her second try. She slipped inside. The supply room smelled like antiseptic and industrial cleaner. Metal shelving units lined the walls, stacked with bandages, IV supplies, surgical instruments in sealed packaging. Ava moved past all of it, to the back of the room, to the small ventilation access panel near the floor. She knelt down and pressed her palm flat against the metal. She could feel vibrations in it. Footsteps. Close. She stood up and took stock. No weapon. 1 exit. Limited cover. Unknown number of hostiles with unknown armament. In Afghanistan, her team had a saying, "You fight with what you have, not what you wish you had." She started looking at what she had. Across the building, on the first floor in the East Wing, 3 Navy SEALs were trying to figure out what had just happened to their mission. Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb had been with SEAL Team 8 for 11 years. He had done 4 deployments, 2 of them in environments that made Baghdad look like a training exercise. He was not a man who startled easily. But when the first explosion went off in the parking structure, a shaped charge, he'd recognize that sound anywhere. And his comms went dead in the same breath. He had felt something he almost never felt. Surprise. "Torres," he said sharply, "what do we have?" Petty Officer Second Class Daniela Torres was already at the window, her back flat against the wall as she peered through the gap in the blind. Multiple tangos. I count 6. No, 8 on the ground level. They're in uniform. Someone's kit. She pulled back from the window. They're wearing our guy's gear, Marcus. Webb's jaw tightened. That meant the outer security team was gone. All 4 of them. Reyes. He turned to the third man in the room, Petty Officer First Class David Reyes, who was already working on re-establishing comms. Tell me you've got something. Working on it. Reyes didn't look up. His fingers were moving fast over the radio equipment. Jammers. Military grade. Somebody planned this. Somebody definitely planned this, Torres said quietly. Webb moved to the center of the room. He ran the numbers fast in his head, the way he'd been trained to. 3 of them, armed, against what sounded like at least 12 to 15 hostiles with tactical gear and radio discipline. The VIP target was 3 floors up. The civilian staff was scattered throughout the building. Comms were down. The outer perimeter was compromised. All right, he said. Here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to rush in blind and get ourselves killed before we've done any good. Torres, I need you to map every position you can confirm. Reyes, keep working on those comms. I'm going to... The door opened. All 3 of them raised their weapons. Ava stepped into the room with her hands up, fingers spread, moving slowly. She looked at the 3 gun barrels pointed at her face with an expression that could only be described as mildly inconvenienced. Nurse Chen, Webb said, not lowering his weapon. How did you get past? Service corridor, she said. East side. There's a junction near stairwell 3 that they haven't locked down yet, but they will in about 6 minutes based on their current sweep pattern. She lowered her hands slowly. I counted 8 tangos on level 1, 4 on level 2 moving toward the VIP floor, and at least 2 covering the main entrance. There may be more I haven't seen. They've jammed your comms, they've taken the outer team, and their primary objective is the minister on the 4th floor. Complete silence. Torres looked at Webb. Webb looked at Ava. Reyes had stopped working on the radio and was just staring at her. You counted them, Webb said. Yes. From where? I moved through the service corridor. There are 4 vantage points along the east wall where you can observe the main corridors without being seen if you know where to stand. She said it the way someone might describe a shortcut through traffic. The sight lines are good from level 2, better from level 3. Webb took a slow breath. Miss Chen, you need to stay here. This room is defensible. There's cover and... They're going to kill the minister, Ava said. We know that. And you have 3 people and no comms against 15. We're aware of our situation. Are you aware, Ava said, her voice shifting. Not louder, not harder, but somehow more direct, more present, like a frequency that cut through static. That the ventilation system on this floor connects directly to the ceiling space above the 4th floor corridor. And that there's a maintenance catwalk up there that runs the full length of the wing? Webb stared at her. I did a full walkthrough of this building in my first 2 days, she said. I always do that in a new facility. Old habit. Old habit, Torres repeated slowly. Ava looked at her. Something moved behind Ava's eyes. A flicker of decision, or maybe of memory. Then it was gone. I spent some time in places where knowing your exits mattered. That's all. What kind of places? Webb asked. The kind where I couldn't afford not to know, she said. She looked at him steadily. I can help you, but we need to move now. Webb holstered his weapon. He looked at Torres, who gave him a microscopic shrug that, between them, meant, I have no idea, but what choice do we have? He looked at Reyes, who had gone back to the radio but was listening. What do you need? Webb said. For the first time since she'd walked into the room, Ava looked almost, not quite but almost, like she let out a breath. Access to the maintenance corridor on the north side, and whatever you have that you can spare. I'll tell you what I'm going to do when I know it'll work. That's not how we operate, Miss Chen. Ava, she said. Ava, he said. We don't go in without a plan. I have a plan, she said. I'm just not going to explain it to you in a room where we're burning time we don't have. She moved toward the door. Are you coming or not? Webb looked at Torres one more time. Torres shrugged again, but this time the shrug said, I think I kind of want to follow her. Move, Webb said. They moved. The next 8 minutes were the kind that condensed time, where every second feels loaded with consequence, and the world narrows to the distance between your next step and whatever is waiting at the end of it. Ava led them through the service corridor with a confidence that Webb, who had navigated hostile environments on 3 continents, found deeply unsettling. Not because she seemed reckless, because she seemed absolutely certain. Every turn she took without hesitation. Every door she pushed, she already knew whether it would open. She moved like someone who had already run this route 100 times in her head. You mapped this place in 2 days, Torres said quietly as they moved. It wasn't quite a question. Closer to 36 hours, Ava said without turning around. Why? Because if something like this happened, I wanted to be useful. She paused at a junction and held up one fist, the universal military gesture for stop. They all stopped. She listened for 3 seconds, then moved forward again. Keep your voice down from here. The acoustics in this section carry. Torres caught Webb's eye again. This time the look on Torres's face was different. It wasn't skepticism anymore. It was something closer to recalibration. They reached the base of the maintenance shaft on the north side. Ava stopped and turned to face them. In the low light of the corridor, her expression was focused and completely composed. Not the composure of someone suppressing fear, the composure of someone who had moved through fear so many times that it had simply become part of the process. The catwalk above 4 puts me directly over their position, she said quietly. I can see the entire corridor from up there without being seen. The minister is in room 412. If they've moved him, I'll know it within 30 seconds of being in position. And then what? Webb said. You're a nurse. What exactly are you planning to? He stopped, because Ava had reached into the maintenance panel beside the shaft. Not the panel that was visible from the corridor, but a secondary one, tucked behind the first, that you'd never find unless you were looking. And she had produced, from a sealed case that had absolutely no business being in a hospital maintenance shaft, a long, matte black object that Webb recognized before his brain had even finished processing what his eyes were seeing. A rifle. Not just any rifle, a suppressed SOCOM spec precision rifle, broken down into 2 components for transport and reassembled in her hands in about 4 seconds, with the practiced motion of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Webb did not speak. Torres made a sound that was not quite a word. Reyes at the back of the group said, very quietly, "Oh." Ava checked the action, confirmed the magazine, and looked up at them. Her expression had not changed. I've had it here since my 2nd week, she said simply. Cleared with the right people. Not with the people you'd expect, but with the right ones. She paused. You can ask questions later. Right now I need to get up that shaft. Webb found his voice. Who are you? He said. Ava slung the rifle and looked at him. And for just a moment, just a single, unguarded instant, something honest and tired and very old moved across her face, like the surface of deep water disturbed by something far below. Right now, she said, I'm the person who's going to make sure that minister lives. She reached up and grabbed the first rung of the maintenance ladder. Watch the east corridor. If anyone comes through that door, we'll handle it, Webb said. His voice was different now. He said it the way one professional speaks to another. Ava nodded once. Then she climbed. The shaft was narrow and dark and smelled like dust in old metal. She moved up it quickly, breathing through her nose, keeping her elbows close. She had climbed worse. She had climbed worse in the dark with bullets hitting the wall 3 feet below her, which put a maintenance shaft at Al-Rashid Hospital firmly in the category of inconvenient but manageable. When she reached the catwalk, she eased herself over the lip and stayed low. She moved along the catwalk on her elbows, slow and methodical, until she reached the graded section above the fourth-floor corridor. She looked down. She saw the minister. She saw the man holding a gun to his head. She saw 4 more armed men in the corridor, positioned at the stairwell doors, watching the approach. She saw, against the far wall, a young orderly, barely 20 years old. She recognized him. His name was Kareem. He had brought her tea on her 3rd day and asked shyly if she liked the city. Sitting with his hands tied behind his back, a bruise already forming along his jaw. She set the rifle. She slowed her breathing. And then she waited for the exact right moment, because that was what made the difference between a shot that solved the problem and a shot that made it worse. The waiting. The absolute iron patience of knowing that you only got one chance and you did not take it until you were certain. Below her, the man with the gun was saying something to the minister. She couldn't hear all of it. She heard enough. She heard the word execution. She heard the word broadcast. She heard the minister, a dignified man in his 60s who had survived 3 assassination attempts and 2 coups, say quietly in English, "I am not afraid of you." The man with the gun laughed. It was the same laugh she had heard at the beginning of all this. The laugh of a man who had done terrible things and suffered no consequences for them and had come to believe that was simply the natural order of the world. Ava's finger found the trigger. Her world went very quiet. Her finger was on the trigger. Her breathing was controlled. Her world had narrowed to a single point, the space between the man's temple and the minister's future. And in that space, there was nothing but clarity. Then the catwalk moved. Not much. A vibration, small and distant, traveling through the metal from somewhere behind her. Someone else was in the shaft. Ava did not pull the trigger. She did not turn around. She stayed exactly where she was, every muscle locked, and listened. The vibration came again, closer this time, and with it came the faint, unmistakable sound of a boot scuffing against a rung. One person, moving fast, not tactically, panicked. She exhaled through her nose and waited. "Chen." The whisper came from 3 feet behind her. She recognized the voice without turning. "Torres. Don't shoot me. I followed you up." "I told Webb to watch the corridor," Ava said, barely moving her lips. "Webb is watching the corridor. I'm here because there are now 6 tangos on this floor, not 4. 2 more came up the south stairwell 90 seconds ago." Torres was breathing hard from the climb, but keeping her voice flat. Professional. "They're moving room to room. They'll reach the minister's position in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Ava processed that without expression. Below her, through the grating, the commander was still talking, still performing for whoever he imagined was watching. He liked the sound of his own authority. That was useful. Men who liked to perform gave you time. "The 2 new ones," Ava said. "Where exactly?" "North end, working south, checking rooms." Torres had moved up beside her now, close enough that Ava could see her face in the low light. Torres was looking down through the grating with the focused, calculating expression of someone doing very fast math. "They're going to box us in. Not if I move first." Ava shifted her catwalk by about 18 inches. A slow, deliberate movement. Weight transferred silently from one point to the next. The new angle gave her a clean line down the corridor. She could see the minister. She could see the commander. She could see 2 of the 4 flanking guards. "When I fire, everything changes. You understand that?" "I understand." "The other 2 guards at the stairwell doors are going to react in under 2 seconds. They'll move toward the sound, even through the suppressor. This ceiling isn't soundproofed. They'll feel the impact. You need to be ready to move the second I fire the first shot." Torres was quiet for a moment. "You said the first shot. How many are you planning?" Ava looked at her. "However many it takes." Torres stared back at her for a long second, and something shifted in her expression. Not quite fear, not quite awe, but something that lived in the territory between the two. She had spent 11 years working alongside men who were supposed to be the most capable fighters in the world, and none of them had ever looked at a situation like this with the particular brand of absolute, unhurried certainty that Ava Chen was projecting right now. "Okay," Torres said quietly. "Tell me what you need. 30 seconds of silence and then be ready to move fast." Torres nodded and went still. Ava turned back to the grating. Below her, the minister had said something. She caught the end of it, a fragment in Arabic that roughly translated to, "You have already lost." And the commander had stopped his performance for just a moment. Just a flicker. The kind of hesitation that came from a man who had expected fear and gotten defiance, and didn't quite know what to do with it. She used that hesitation. The first shot was through the grating. She had accounted for the deflection. The grating was standard aluminum mesh, open enough that at this range, the round would hold its path within acceptable tolerance. She had done this before, in places she never talked about, under conditions that made this moment look almost comfortable. The commander dropped. He didn't fall dramatically. He didn't spin. He simply went down, the way a building goes down in a controlled demolition, fast and complete and final. The minister staggered sideways. The guard closest to the commander froze for exactly 1 second, which was exactly 1 second too long. The second shot. The third came a beat later, before the sound of the second had finished registering in the corridor below. Then the screaming started. Not the minister, not the staff, but the remaining guards, who were suddenly, violently aware that something was killing them from a direction they couldn't locate or understand. One of them fired upward at the ceiling, not at any target, just firing because firing was the only response his body knew. The round hit 2 feet to Ava's left. She didn't flinch. "Move," she said to Torres. Torres was already moving. Down on the 4th floor, Marcus Webb heard the shots. Muffled, suppressed, but 3 of them in fast succession. And he did what he had been doing for 11 years when things started happening faster than he could fully process. He moved forward. He came through the stairwell door with his weapon up and found a corridor in chaos. 2 guards were down. 1 was still standing, spinning in place looking for a target that didn't exist at eye level. Webb put him down before the man's eyes had finished their rotation. The minister was pressed against the wall, one hand over his chest, breathing hard but upright and conscious, unhurt. Webb reached him in 4 steps. "Sir, I need you to move with me right now." The minister looked at him. Then he looked up at the ceiling. Then he looked at Webb again. "The woman," he said in careful English. "In the ceiling, who is she?" "Right now, sir, she's the reason you're alive. Let's go." They moved. Above them, Ava was already shifting position. The 2 guards who had come up the south stairwell had heard the shots and were moving fast in her direction, which meant they were moving toward a problem they didn't understand yet. She could hear their boots on the floor below, heavy, rapid, angry. She tracked them through the grating as they came into her sightline, and she made the decision in the space between 2 heartbeats. The 4th shot was clean. The 5th was not. She caught the angle wrong by 2 degrees, and the round went through the man's shoulder instead of center mass. He went down, but he didn't go down finished. She heard him shouting, heard his partner responding. She was already moving, sliding back along the catwalk, because a wounded man who can still communicate his position is more dangerous in some ways than a dead one. She reached the shaft, went down it fast, and came out into the service corridor to find Torres waiting with her weapon up, covering the junction. 4 down up there, Ava said quietly, already moving. 1 wounded, still active, south stairwell level 4. He's got a friend. Webb has the minister, Torres said, falling into step beside her. He's moving him to the secondary safe room on level 2. Good. Ava was thinking fast, running the updated count in her head. Started with 15. 4 on level 4, 3 confirmed down, 1 wounded. 8 on level 1 as of 40 minutes ago. At least 4 on level 2. The numbers were moving in the right direction, but they were not finished. Not close to finished. How many rounds does Webb have? Full kit, Reyes 2. Then we have enough for what's left. She paused at a junction. The wounded man upstairs is going to tell his people where the shots came from. They're going to start looking up. That changes the dynamic. How so? It means they're about to get scared, Ava said, and scared men make noise. Torres almost smiled. Almost. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Ava didn't answer it like one. Watch your left when we come through that door, she said instead. The corridor bends at 45 degrees, and there's a blind spot behind the supply cart. They went through the door. There was no one behind the supply cart. There were, however, two men coming from the opposite direction at a run, weapons up, already firing before they had a clear target, which confirmed what Ava had said about scared men and noise. Torres took the first one. Ava moved inside the second one's firing arc, close, controlled, dangerous, and ended the engagement with the kind of brutal efficiency that had nothing to do with the rifle and everything to do with 8 years of knowing exactly how close you could get to someone before the gun became a liability rather than an advantage. She stepped back. She checked her hands. She looked at Torres. Torres was staring at her. You were force recon, Torres said. It was not a question this time either. A long time ago, Ava said. That's not something you stop being. Ava didn't argue. We need to get to level 1. On the level below them, Senior Chief Webb had secured the minister in the secondary safe room, a reinforced medical storage space with a heavy door and no exterior windows, and left Reyes with him while he retraced his route back toward the main corridor. His earpiece was still dead, the jammer still running somewhere in the building, which meant he was operating entirely on what he could see and hear, and what the woman with the rifle had told him 45 minutes ago. He heard someone coming down the stairwell ahead of him and raised his weapon. Ava and Torres came through the door. Webb lowered his weapon. He looked at them both. He looked at the rifle slung across Ava's back. He looked at Ava's face, which was carrying no expression that could be read easily or quickly. Minister's secure, he said. I know, she said. I heard you moving him. From the catwalk. From the catwalk. She was already scanning the corridor ahead of them. You have 6 or 7 still active on level 1 and possibly 2 on level 3. The wounded man from level 4 may have bled out by now. He took it in the shoulder at close range, arterial, probably didn't have long. She paused. I want to say that clinically, not casually. I want you to understand I know what that means. Webb looked at her for a moment. I know you do, he said quietly, and something in his voice said he was not just saying it to be polite. They moved down toward level 1 together, 3 of them, moving in a tight formation that had no right to work as well as it did, given that they had never trained together and had met, in any meaningful sense, approximately an hour ago. But Ava moved the way Torres had started to recognize, with that particular quality of absolute spatial awareness, of knowing where she was in relation to everything else at all times without having to look. And Webb, to his credit, adapted to her lead without making it a point of pride. He was a man who understood the difference between rank and capability. And right now, capability was the only currency that mattered. The level 1 corridor was wrong before they entered it. Ava put up her fist. They stopped. Someone's using the patients, she said, very quietly, very still. What? Listen, she tilted her head fractionally. You hear that? The crying. It's not random, they're grouped. They've pulled people out of the wards, and they're using them as a screen. Her voice had tightened by a fraction, the first sign of something other than clinical focus that she had shown in the past hour. It wasn't fear, it was anger. Conclusion, directed, cold as steel, but anger. That changes everything. How many patients? Torres asked. I don't know yet. Ava was thinking hard. I need to see before I can move. If I fire into that configuration without knowing exactly where everyone is, you won't, Webb said. She looked at him. You haven't yet, he said simply. Something moved across her face. Not softness exactly, but something that acknowledged, quietly and without performance, that he had seen her and was not afraid of what he saw. "There's a service hatch at the end of this corridor," she said. "Gives me a ground-level angle on the main ward entrance. Give me 3 minutes." She was already moving before he answered. Webb watched her go. Torres came to stand beside him. "She pre-positioned that rifle," Torres said. Her voice was low. "She was already here. She knew." Yeah, she knew something was going to happen. Or she was prepared in case something did. Webb watched the far end of the corridor. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Webb thought about it. He thought about the rifle in the maintenance shaft, broken down and sealed in a case, placed with precision in a location she had identified within her first 36 hours at the facility. He thought about the way she moved, not like someone reacting to a crisis, but like someone executing a plan they had thought through a long time ago. He thought about her face when she had said, "I've had it here since my 2nd week," and the particular quality of calm in that statement, not the calm of someone who got lucky, the calm of someone who had been ready. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but right now I'm glad she was here." From the far end of the corridor, 3 measured shots, suppressed, fast, spaced about 2 seconds apart. Then silence. Then Ava's voice from around the corner. "Clear. Move now." They moved. The scene in the main ward entrance was something Webb would think about for a long time afterward. 6 patients, elderly men and women, most of them in gowns, 2 still attached to portable IV lines, were huddled together against the wall, unharmed, their guards no longer a factor. 3 of the remaining hostiles were down. The other 4 had retreated toward the main entrance when the shooting started, and Ava had let them go. A calculated decision, because she had seen what Webb hadn't yet, that the main entrance was where the jammer was. "The comms," she said. "The device is at the main entrance. If we take that position, you get your communications back." Webb understood immediately. "And you want to hit them before they can call for reinforcements?" "They already tried," she said. "Twice. Something's blocking their outbound signal, too. I don't know if that's our people outside or a technical issue on their end, but either way it won't last." She checked her remaining rounds without looking down. A habit, automatic, her hands knowing the count before her mind asked. "We have a window, small one." 4 hostiles at the entrance, Torres said. "Armed, expecting us now." "Expecting you," Ava said. "Not expecting this." She reached into her kit, the medical kit, the one she had carried in on her first day, and produced a small device that Webb identified after a half-second delay as a military-grade flashbang. Not something that belonged in a nurse's medical bag. Not remotely. Torres made a sound. "Where did you?" Webb started. "Same place as the rifle," Ava said. "I told you. The right people know I'm here." She held the device in her palm, looking at it with an expression that mixed the professional and the personal in a way that was hard to look at directly. "I don't enjoy this," she said quietly, to herself as much as to them. "I want you to know that. I never have." Nobody answered. It wasn't the kind of statement that needed an answer. "On my mark," she said, and her voice was steady again. And the corridor ahead of them was about to change forever. And somewhere outside the building, the sun was still blazing over Baghdad, like none of this was happening at all. She moved to the corner. She pulled the pin. She looked back at Webb and Torres one final time, and in that look was everything. The weight of what she carried, the steadiness of who she was, the particular loneliness of being the person who could do what needed to be done. "Mark," she said. The flashbang went through the corner before any of them had taken another breath. The detonation was loud even through the reinforced corridor walls. A hard, concussive crack that hit the chest before the ears had time to process it, followed by a half-second of absolute white silence. Ava was already moving before the echo finished. She came around the corner low and fast, and the four men at the main entrance were exactly where she expected them to be. Disoriented, hands up instinctively, weapons momentarily loose. And she worked left to right with the precision of someone who had done this in worse light and worse conditions, and with considerably less time to think about it. 4 seconds. 4 problems resolved. Webb and Torres came in behind her and found nothing left to do. Webb swept the entrance out of professional habit, covering angles that no longer needed covering. And then he stopped and stood very still for a moment, breathing through his nose, recalibrating. Torres went straight to the communications device, a black rectangular unit mounted to a rolling cart, bristling with antenna connections, and started working on it with the focused urgency of someone who understood exactly how much they needed it back. 30 seconds, Torres said without looking up. Ava was already at the entrance desk, checking the fallen men's radios. She pulled the clearest one free and listened. The channel was live, distant voices, Arabic, tense and confused. She listened for 8 seconds, her expression processing. "They have a command element outside," she said. "Vehicle, probably 200 meters north. They've been trying to reach the team inside for the past 11 minutes and getting nothing. They're not sure if it's the jammer interfering with their own signal or if something's gone wrong." She set the radio down. "They're about to send a secondary team in." "How many?" Webb said. The voice said 6, but voices lie when they're nervous, and that voice was nervous. She looked at him. "Could be more." "Torres," Webb said. 20 seconds, Torres said. "Make it 10. Torres pulled 2 wires simultaneously, reconnected them in a different configuration, and the unit on the cart made a sound like a computer restarting. Then her earpiece crackled. She closed her eyes for half a second with the specific relief of someone who had been deaf and had just gotten their hearing back. "Command, this is Torres, SEAL Team 8, operating inside Al-Rashid Medical Center, Baghdad. We have been under attack by a hostile force of approximately 15, now reduced. Minister is secure. We need immediate external support, and we need you to tell us what is coming through that north entrance in the next 5 minutes. Over." The response was fast. 2 many voices at once, then one cutting through the rest. A senior voice, used to being heard. Webb recognized it before Torres had finished handing him the earpiece. Commander Garrett, the man who had sent them here. "Webb, sit rep, now." "Minister is secure, sir. Safe room level 2, Reyes with him. We have 1 American civilian who assisted in the defense of this facility. The hostile command element outside is preparing to send a secondary team through the north entrance. Our assessment is 5 to 8 individuals. We need the exterior perimeter locked down before they breach." A pause, not a long one. "1 American civilian." "Yes, sir." "Who?" Webb looked at Ava. She had moved away from the entrance desk and was doing something that struck him as profoundly strange, given everything that was happening. She was checking the patients who had been used as a human shield, moving from one to the next with practiced efficiency, taking pulses, checking pupils, asking quiet questions in a mix of English and Arabic. A nurse, doing exactly what a nurse did. While the building was still not fully secured, while a secondary attack was 90 seconds away, while she was still carrying a suppressed rifle across her back. "A volunteer nurse named Ava Chen," Webb said into the earpiece. "I'll explain later, sir. Right now, I need that perimeter." Another pause, this one slightly longer, and then, in a tone that Webb had never heard from Commander Garrett in 11 years, a tone that was not quite surprise, but was something adjacent to it, the commander said, "Did you say Ava Chen?" Webb felt something shift. "Yes, sir. Get your people back from the north entrance. Right now, Webb. Pull back." "Sir, that is a direct order. Pull everyone back from the north entrance and let my people handle the exterior. Do you copy?" "I copy, but sir, there are still potentially active hostiles on level 3. "Webb," Garrett's voice had gone very flat. "Do you trust me?" "Yes, sir." "Then move." Webb pulled the earpiece out and looked at Torres, who was watching him with the particular expression she used when she knew something had changed, but didn't yet know what. "We're pulling back from the entrance," he said. "Orders." Torres blinked. "Where? On whose authority?" "Garrett." She processed that. Then she looked at Ava, who had finished checking the last patient and was now standing still, head slightly tilted, listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. "Chen," Torres said, "did you know Garrett was going to say that?" Ava turned slowly. Her expression was careful. "I knew someone was going to say it eventually," she said. "I didn't know when." "What does that mean?" "It means we should move back from this entrance," Ava said, "because there are people outside who have been waiting for the jammer to go down, and now that it has, they have about 60 seconds to do what they came here to do." She said it without drama, without apology, without any of the performance that would have made it easier to absorb. Just the facts, laid out clean. "I am not the only person who prepared for this." Webb stared at her. "You knew this attack was coming." The corridor went very still, not the paralyzed stillness of shock, the sharp, alert stillness of three professionals processing a statement that rearranged everything they thought they understood about the past 2 hours. Ava met his eyes. She did not look away, and she did not rush her answer. "I knew it was possible," she said carefully. "I had credible intelligence, not confirmed, not specific enough to trigger an official response, that this facility was being assessed as a target. I passed it up through the appropriate channels. The appropriate channels determined the threat level was insufficient to warrant a change in protocol." She paused. "I disagreed." "So you pre-positioned a rifle in a maintenance shaft," Torres said slowly. "And a flashbang in a medical kit," Ava said. "And I memorized the building layout, and I learned everyone's name and routine, so I'd know immediately if something was wrong." She looked at Torres steadily. "I wasn't here just to volunteer, no, but I was genuinely here to help. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Webb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Who sent you?" he said. Before she could answer, the north entrance exploded. Not a suicide detonation, a shaped breach charge, military precision, hitting the exterior door exactly where it was weakest and sending a controlled wave of force down the entrance corridor without structurally compromising the building. Webb recognized the signature. So did Torres. They had used that exact type of charge on 3 separate missions in the past 2 years. That was their ordnance. That was American equipment. 6 figures in full tactical gear came through the breach in a stack so clean it looked choreographed. Black kit, no visible insignia, weapons up, moving with the kind of coordinated aggression that separated people who trained together every day from people who were simply well-trained. They swept through the entrance, cleared the immediate space in under 10 seconds, and the lead figure paused when he saw Webb, Torres, and Ava standing in the corridor. He pulled up his balaclava. He was about 40, with a jaw like a geographic feature, and eyes that had the permanent, slightly tired look of a man who had been in too many places like this to fully come back from any of them. He looked at Webb, he looked at Torres, and then he looked at Ava, and something happened in his face that was not a smile and not relief, but was something that contained elements of both. "Ghost," he said. It was a single word, but the weight it carried filled the corridor like a physical thing. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment. When she opened them, she looked almost like she was suppressing something. Not emotion exactly, but the memory of it. "Dawson," she said. "Colonel Dawson, the man who had commanded her unit in Helmand Province. The man who had, 8 years ago, put her name on a commendation that was immediately classified and then told her, privately, in the kind of quiet that only existed between people who had been through something unspeakable together, that she was the best he had ever seen and that he hoped she would find something easier to be. She had tried. She had genuinely tried. "You look like a nurse," he said. I am a nurse, she said. You also just cleared a 15-man hostile force with 3 SEALs who had no idea who you were 2 hours ago. He said it without judgment, almost with tenderness. That's the job, Ava. That's always been the job. I left the job, she said. The job didn't leave you. Webb was watching this exchange with the particular focused attention of a man who understood he was seeing something important and was not yet sure what it meant. Colonel, he said, with respect, who is she? Dawson looked at him, then back at Ava. A question in it, permission almost. Ava shook her head slightly. Later, she said, Level 3 still has 2 hostiles. 1 may be wounded. Level 2 safe room has the minister and Reyes. We need to finish the sweep before anyone talks about anything. Dawson nodded once, the way men nod when they recognize that the person speaking is right and the conversation can wait. Stack up, he said to his team. Level 3, Ghost, you're with me. He looked at Webb. Chief, secure the minister and hold Level 2. We'll take the top. She's a civilian, Webb said. He said it the way you say something you feel obligated to say, even though you already know the answer. Dawson looked at him with something that might have been patience and might have been pity. Chief, he said gently, she is the least civilian person in this building. She has been for a very long time. He turned toward the stairwell. Move, they moved. 11 minutes and 20 seconds of muffled sounds that he was professionally equipped to interpret. Footsteps, 2 short controlled bursts, a single voice shouting in Arabic and then cutting off mid-sentence. More footsteps, silence, and then the crackle of Dawson's voice in his earpiece saying, Level 3 clear, 2 tangos down, no friendly casualties. Webb let out a breath that had been building for about 90 minutes. Reyes sat down against the wall. He had been in position this entire time, weapon up, protecting the minister with a steady reliability that had made him one of Webb's most trusted people. And now that it was over, he sat down like someone whose legs had simply decided to stop performing their secondary function of holding him upright. Is it done? The minister said from behind the door. Yes, sir, Webb said. It's done. A pause. Then the minister said, in a voice that was carefully controlled, but not quite controlled enough to hide the trembling underneath it. The woman, in the ceiling, is she safe? Webb felt something he didn't quite have a word for. Not surprise, he was past surprise at this point. Something quieter than that and more complicated. She's safe, sir, he said. Another pause. Tell her, the minister said, and his voice broke on the last word, just barely, just enough. Tell her that I would like to thank her. Webb pressed his back against the wall and looked up at the ceiling, and he thought about a woman who had memorized a building in 36 hours, who had pre-positioned a weapon in a maintenance shaft, who had moved through a hostile takeover with the calm of someone executing a plan they had carried in their head for a long time. He thought about what that kind of readiness cost, what it required, what it said about the person who lived inside it. I'll tell her, he said. Dawson found him on level 2 12 minutes later. His team was already moving through the building in systematic fashion. Final sweep, confirming the cleared spaces, beginning the process of transitioning the facility back to something resembling normal. Ava was not with him. Where is she? Webb asked. Where do you think? Dawson said. Webb thought about it. Then he went towards C. She was there. Of course she was there. She was standing at the bedside of an elderly patient, a man with a bandaged leg who had been in that bed when all of this started and was presumably still trying to understand what had happened. And she was checking his IV line with steady, careful hands. And she was talking to him in quiet, unhurried Arabic. And the man was looking at her the way people look at someone who has just pulled them back from a very dark edge. She did not look up when Webb came in. She finished what she was doing first. When she turned, her face was different. Not the focused, forward-leaning intensity of the past 2 hours. Something older and more tired, and also somehow more itself. This was Ava Chen without the operational filter on. And Webb realized, looking at her in that room, that this was the version of her that was hardest to carry. Not the ghost, not the Marine, not the sniper in the ceiling, but this, the woman who came back to the ward afterward. "The minister wants to thank you," Webb said. "Tell him I'm glad he's okay," she said. "He's going to want to do it in person." "That's kind of him." She turned back to her patient and adjusted something in the IV line. "I'll be here." Webb stood in the doorway for a moment. He had 100 questions. He understood, without being told, that most of them were not his to ask. There were things operating above his level, things that Garrett and Dawson knew, and he did not. Things that Ava had been part of for a long time that had nothing to do with what she had shown him today. He understood that. He accepted it. But there was one thing he needed to say. "I underestimated you," he said. "From the beginning I looked at you and I decided what you were. And I was wrong." He paused. "I'm not sure I've been that wrong about a person in 11 years. She was quiet for a moment. Her hands had stilled on the IV line. "You weren't wrong," she said finally. "I am a nurse. That part is real. It's always been real." She looked at him over her shoulder, and her expression was complicated and honest in equal measure. "The other part is also real. I've just spent a lot of years trying to figure out how to hold both of them at the same time." "Have you figured it out?" he asked. She looked at the man in the bed, at his tired, grateful, frightened eyes, and she looked at him the way she had looked at the minister through the grating, with that particular attention, that particular care, like every person in front of her was worth the full weight of her focus. "Some days," she said. Webb nodded. He believed her. He turned to leave and then stopped because Torres had appeared in the doorway behind him. And Torres was holding something, a radio patched through to a signal that should not have been able to reach them inside this building. And Torres's face had an expression on it that Webb had seen exactly twice in 11 years of working together. The expression that meant something had changed again, and not in a small way. "Webb," Torres said quietly, "Garrett is asking for Chen directly, not through us, directly. And there are two people with him who are not military." She paused. "One of them is from the State Department." The ward went very still. Ava turned around slowly. She looked at Torres. She looked at the radio. And something moved across her face. Not fear, not surprise, but the particular expression of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing and has just watched it arrive exactly when they expected it, and is still not sure they are ready. "Tell him 5 minutes," she said. "I need to finish rounds." Torres stared at her. "Ava, the State Department." "I know who the State Department is," Ava said calmly. "Tell him 5 minutes." She turned back to her patient. "I made a promise to finish rounds, and I'm going to finish rounds." Torres looked at Webb. Webb looked at Torres, and between them passed a look that contained, in compressed form, everything they had learned about Ava Chen in the past 2 hours, which was considerable, and everything they still did not know, which was, evidently, considerably more. Torres raised the radio. "She says 5 minutes," she said. The voice on the other end of the radio was silent for a moment, and then, in a tone that Webb would think about for a very long time, Commander Garrett, a man who had never in 11 years expressed anything approaching deference to someone below his rank, said, "Tell her to take her time." She finished rounds in exactly 4 minutes and 50 seconds, not because she was rushing, because Ava Chen had never in her life moved slower than the situation required. And right now the situation required that she check every patient in Ward C with the same thoroughness she had given them every morning for 3 weeks, regardless of what was waiting for her on the other end of a radio that the State Department was holding. She checked the elderly man's IV. She checked the blood pressure of the woman in the corner bed who had hypertension and a tendency to spike when she was stressed, and who had just lived through a terrorist siege, which qualified as stressful by any reasonable measure. She checked the young Iraqi soldier in the far bed, who had been unconscious through the entire event and therefore had the most peaceful morning of anyone in the building. Then she walked out of Ward C and down the corridor to where Torres was waiting with the radio, and Webb was standing with his arms crossed, in the particular posture of a man who has accepted that he does not fully understand what is happening, but has made peace with that fact. She took the radio from Torres without asking for it. "This is Chen," she said. The voice that came back was not Garrett. It was a woman's voice, measured, precise, with a specific cadence of someone who chose every word before it left her mouth, and never used two when one would do. "Ms. Chen, my name is Margaret Hale. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs. I'm told the situation inside the facility is resolved." "It is," Ava said, "and the minister is unharmed." "He is." "Good." A pause that lasted exactly long enough to be deliberate. "I'd like to speak with you in person. There's a secure vehicle outside the north entrance. I can give you 10 minutes to—" "I know what you want to talk about," Ava said. Another pause, longer this time. "Do you? You want to talk about what I know and who I told and whether any of it is a problem for you." Ava said it without aggression, without performance. She said it the way she said everything, directly, clearly, with no wasted energy. "The answer is that I passed my intelligence to the correct channels 6 weeks ago. What those channels did with it is above my level. If it's above your level too, that's a different conversation. But I'm not interested in having it in a parking lot." Webb and Torres were both very carefully not looking at each other. The woman on the radio was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Come to the vehicle," she said. "Please." Ava handed the radio back to Torres. She looked at Webb. "Can you walk me out?" Webb said yes before he had consciously decided to. They walked through the cleared corridors together, past the evidence of what had happened, which the tactical team was already systematically documenting, past the staff who were beginning to emerge from locked rooms and barricaded offices with the shaken, disbelieving expressions of people who had survived something and hadn't yet figured out how to hold that fact. Several of them looked at Ava, not with the blank relief of recognizing a familiar face, but with something more specific, something that said they had heard things, or seen things, or put things together in the way that people do when they have been hiding in a room for 2 hours, listening to a building come back to itself, 1 floor at a time. Fatima was standing in the doorway of Ward C when they passed it. She had followed instructions. The door had been locked, the patients had been kept below the window line, and she had held everything together with the quiet competence of someone who understood that panic was a luxury she could not afford. Now she was standing in the doorway looking at Ava with an expression that was not gratitude and was not awe, but was something more complex than either. "You knew," Fatima said. Ava stopped walking. "I was prepared," she said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Fatima said. It was the same question Torres had asked, in a different corridor, what felt like a lifetime ago. "I've worked with you for 3 weeks, Ava. I thought I knew who you were." "You did know who I was," Ava said. "You still do. None of what happened today changes who I am when I'm in that ward." She held Fatima's gaze. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more. I'm sorry you were afraid." Fatima looked at her for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "The man in bed 7, his IV had been running dry for an hour. I didn't notice. You noticed. When you came back, that was the first thing you fixed." She paused. "You came back from all of that, and the first thing you fixed was his IV line." "He needed it," Ava said simply. Fatima pressed her lips together. She nodded once, with the compressed emotion of a woman who was going to cry later, in private, and was not going to do it here. She stepped back into the ward and let the door close behind her. Webb walked the rest of the way to the north entrance without speaking. He felt like anything he said would be inadequate in a way that would somehow make things worse. The vehicle outside was black, armored, and bore no visible markings. 2 men in civilian clothes stood beside it with the relaxed, but not relaxed bearing of security personnel who were very good at looking like they were doing nothing while doing a great deal. The woman standing between them was in her early 50s, trim, wearing clothes that were expensive without announcing themselves, with short, silver-streaked hair and eyes that moved over Ava with the careful, measuring attention of someone who had spent a career reading people quickly and accurately. Margaret Hale. She looked exactly like her voice sounded. She looked at Webb. "Chief Webb, thank you for your service today. I'd like a few minutes alone with Miss Chen." Webb looked at Ava. Ava gave him a nod, small but clear. He stepped back. Hale waited until he was far enough away. Then she looked at Ava with an expression that dropped the diplomatic mask by several degrees. Not all the way, but enough to reveal something underneath that was close to frustrated respect. "You went off protocol," she said. "I went off your protocol," Ava said. "I followed mine. Your protocol involved pre-positioning an unauthorized weapon in a military medical facility in a foreign country. My protocol involved being prepared to defend a facility that I believed was a target and that your department decided was not a sufficient priority to reinforce." Ava's voice stayed level. It stayed level the way a foundation stays level, not because nothing is happening above it, but because it was built for exactly this. 16 people are alive right now who would not be if I had followed your protocol. The minister is one of them. Hale was quiet. She looked past Ava at the building, at the shattered north entrance, at the controlled activity of the tactical team moving in and out. She looked like a woman doing math in her head that she already knew the answer to and didn't like. "The intelligence you passed up 6 weeks ago," she said finally, "it came from a source inside the network that planned this attack. I know where it came from. That source is now burned. The network knows there was a leak. I know that too. Which means the person who gave you the information is in danger." Ava did not answer immediately, and in that pause, that specific, weighted pause, Webb, watching from 20 feet away, could see something change in her posture. Something that was not the operational Ava, not the nurse Ava, but something that lived underneath both of those layers. Something personal and old and heavy. "I know," Ava said. Her voice was the same. Her voice was always the same. But something in it had changed frequency by a fraction, and Hale heard it because Hale was very good at her job. "Who is he?" Hale said quietly. Ava looked at her directly. "He is the reason I knew about this facility. He is the reason I was here, and he is now the reason I need you to do something for me." Hale held her gaze. "What do you need?" "I need an extraction. Tonight. There's a window of about 6 hours before the network closes it permanently." Ava pulled a folded piece of paper from inside her scrubs, from an inside pocket that was not part of the standard uniform that she had sewn in herself 2 years ago against exactly this kind of moment, and held it out. "The coordinates are on there, the contact protocol, everything you need." Hale took the paper. She looked at it. She looked at Ava. "You've been running this for how long?" "Long enough. Without authorization. With the authorization of the people who needed to know and the discretion of the people who didn't." Ava paused. "I told you I passed the intelligence through the correct channels. I didn't say those channels were official ones." Hale stared at her. This was, Webb could tell even from distance, a woman who was not accustomed to being outmaneuvered in conversations about information and authorization, and who was processing the experience with something between professional admiration and genuine irritation. "You built a parallel network," Hale said. "I built a relationship," Ava said. "There's a difference. You keep making that distinction. Because it keeps being true." Hale folded the paper and put it in her jacket pocket. She looked at Ava for a long moment. Really looked, the way people rarely look at each other in professional contexts, with the mask down and the full attention engaged. "Colonel Dawson says you're the best he's ever seen," she said. "He says that about very few people. Dawson is generous." Dawson is precise, Hale said. He doesn't use words loosely. She buttoned her jacket. I'm going to make some calls. The extraction will be coordinated. You'll have confirmation within 2 hours. She started to turn toward the vehicle, then stopped. The people inside, the SEALs, what do they know? They know I was prepared, Ava said. They know I helped. The details of why I was here and who I've been working with, they don't know that, and they don't need to. Hale nodded slowly. And if they ask questions? They already have, Ava said. I'll answer the ones I can answer and let the others sit. People like Webb, they understand that there are things above their level. They don't like it, but they understand it. She paused. He's a good man. They all are. They deserve better support today than they got. Something shifted in Hale's expression. A flicker of something that might have been shame if Margaret Hale was the kind of person who permitted herself shame in a professional context. That's a fair criticism, she said. It's not a criticism, Ava said. It's a fact. Do something with it. Hale got in the vehicle. It moved away. Ava stood there for a moment, alone in the open air for the first time since before the attack began. And she tilted her face up toward the sky. Not dramatically, not with any visible emotion, just the simple animal fact of a person who had been inside under pressure for 2 hours and needed a moment of sky and air and the feeling of the sun on her face before she went back in. Webb walked over. He stood beside her. He did not say anything. After about 30 seconds, she said, "The man who gave me the intelligence. His name is Samir. He's 52 years old. He was an engineer before the war changed what being an engineer meant in this country. He has 3 daughters. He has been passing information to people he trusted for 4 years because he believes, genuinely believes, that the alternative is worse." She paused. "He trusted me specifically because I am not official, because official means documented, and documented means exposed." "Is he going to be okay?" Webb said. Ava looked at the horizon. "Hale is good at her job," she said, "and I've given her everything she needs, and I have to believe that's enough." She said the last part in a way that made it clear it was something she had said to herself many times, in many places, about many situations, and that the repetition had not made it easier. Webb nodded. He understood that particular kind of faith, the faith that you had done what you could and that the rest was out of your hands, which was not really faith at all, but was the only functional alternative to coming apart at the seams. "Garrett wants to debrief you," he said. "I know. He's going to want answers. He'll get the ones I can give." She straightened up, squared her shoulders. The sky and the sun had done whatever they needed to do, and now she was ready to go back in. "Is the minister still in the safe room?" "Reyes brought him up to a proper room on level 2 about 20 minutes ago. He's been asking for you every 10 minutes. Then let's not make him ask again." She turned back toward the building. At the entrance, she paused. "Webb." "Yeah." "You asked me earlier who I was." She looked at him, and the tiredness was there, and the weight was there, and the thing she had been carrying so long it had become part of her posture was there. But so was something else, something clear and unashamed and exactly itself. "I'm a nurse who used to be a Marine, who never fully stopped being either. That's the whole answer. There's no version of it that's simpler than that." "I know," Webb said. "I think I knew it the second you walked into that room and looked at 3 weapons pointed at your face like they were a mild inconvenience." She made a sound. It was not quite a laugh. It was too tired and too real for that, but it was in the same neighborhood. It was the sound of a person acknowledging, briefly and without performance, that something someone said had landed somewhere genuine. Then she walked back into the building. The minister was sitting up in bed when she came in, a private room on level 2. Reyes posted outside, the door half open. He was a tall man made smaller by the hospital gown and the bandages from his surgery, but his eyes were the eyes of someone who had survived too many dangerous things to be diminished by any individual one of them. He looked at Ava the way he had looked up at the ceiling in the fourth-floor corridor, with the specific attention of someone trying to understand a thing they had witnessed and had not yet fully processed. "Nurse Chen," he said. "Minister," she said. She came to the bedside and checked his chart out of pure habit, the way she always did, and he watched her do it with something in his expression that was close to wonder. "I heard you," he said, "from above. I could not see you, but I heard the shots, 3 of them, very fast." He paused. "And the man who was going to kill me was simply gone." "Yes," she said, "you saved my life." "I did my job," she said. "Your job," he repeated. He looked at the nurse's badge on her scrubs. He looked at her face. "Which job, Miss Chen? The one on the badge or the other one?" Ava met his eyes. "Both of them require the same thing," she said. "You pay attention, you learn what you can, you act when it matters, and you do it because the person in front of you is worth doing it for." She set the chart down. "You told that man you weren't afraid of him." "I was very afraid of him," the minister said quietly. "I know," she said. "That's what made it brave." He looked at her for a long moment. His hands resting on the blanket were not entirely still. The fine tremor of a man who had been holding himself together by force of will for several hours and was now in the relative safety of a hospital room with the threat neutralized, allowing himself to feel the edges of what had almost happened. "My daughter is 12 years old," he said. It came out quietly, almost to himself. "She is very angry with me for working in this city. She says it is too dangerous." "She's right," Ava said. He looked at her, startled. "That doesn't mean you shouldn't be here," she said. "It means she loves you, and she's not wrong about the risk." She adjusted the IV line with the same careful hands that had 2 hours earlier held a rifle with absolute steadiness at a man who had intended to execute this man in front of a camera. "Tell her you're okay. That's the most important thing you'll do today." He nodded slowly. His hands had stilled. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" he asked. "As a nurse. Just as a nurse." "That's what I came here to do," she said. "Yes," he nodded again, and something in his face relaxed. The particular relaxation of a man who has been given, not reassurance exactly, but something truer than reassurance. A fact he could hold on to. "Thank you," he said, and he said it the way people say it when they mean it in every possible dimension. For the life saved, yes, but also for the IV line checked, for the steady presence, for the person who came back to the ward and fixed the small things after doing the enormous thing, because that was who she was, and she had never been anything else. Ava finished her check and walked out of the room. Reyes held the door for her. He was young, younger than she'd thought when she first met him, with the alert, slightly overwhelmed expression of someone who had just had their model of the world significantly revised in a short period of time. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask," she said. "Why nursing?" He said it like it was the most genuine question he had, not skeptical, not challenging, just honest curiosity from a young man trying to understand how the same person could be what he had seen today and also what he saw in front of him now. Ava thought about it. She gave it the time it deserved. "Because the hardest thing I ever did in the Marines was watch people get hurt and not be able to do enough," she said. "The medicine was always the part I wanted more of, the healing, not the other part." She paused. "The other part, I accepted a long time ago that there are situations where it's necessary and I'm the right person to do it. But accepting something doesn't mean choosing it. It means being honest about what you are and making sure what you are gets used the right way." Reyes looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Chief Webb is never going to be the same after today. I want you to know that. None of us are." "Good," she said, not cruelly, with something that was almost gentleness. "You shouldn't be. That means it meant something." She went back down the corridor. Dawson was at the other end, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and the expression of a man who had finished what he came to do and was now waiting for whatever came next. He watched her come toward him with the easy recognition of someone who had known a person in extreme conditions, which is the most honest way you can know anyone. "Hale called me," he said. "Samir's extraction is go." Ava stopped walking. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds. When she opened them, they were clear and steady and exactly what they always were. "Good," she said. "She also said," Dawson continued, watching her carefully, "that she wants to talk to you about something more formal. A role, officially attached, with resources and authorization and all the things you've been doing without." Ava looked at him. "Before you say no," he said. "I wasn't going to say no," she said. Dawson blinked. Of all the responses he had prepared for, that apparently was not among them. "You weren't." "I'm going to say I need time to think about it," she said, "which is different from no." She started walking again, past him, back toward Ward C. "I have rounds to finish." He turned to watch her go. "You just helped stop a terrorist siege, and you're going back to check IV lines." "The patients didn't stop needing care because the building got complicated," she said without turning around. "That's not how it works." He watched her until she turned the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message to Margaret Hale that said only, "She'll come around. Give her time." He had barely pocketed the phone when Webb appeared beside him. Webb had the expression of a man who had been processing information for several hours and had arrived at a conclusion that he was still deciding whether to say out loud. "She built a network," Webb said, "an unofficial one. She's been running her own intelligence operation out of a nurse's uniform." "Yes," Dawson said. "For how long?" Dawson looked at him steadily. "Longer than you want to know." Webb absorbed that. He looked down the corridor where Ava had disappeared. "Why does she do it?" he said. "She doesn't have to. She could go home. She could work in a hospital in Boston and never be near any of this again." Dawson was quiet for a moment. He thought about Helmand Province. He thought about a 26-year-old Force Recon Marine who had, on 3 separate occasions, saved the lives of men in his unit through a combination of medical skill and sniper capability that no one had ever quite seen in the same person before. He thought about the way she had looked at the men she patched up, not as assets, not as casualties, but as people, with the same specific personal attention she apparently gave to every single human being she encountered. "Because she can," Dawson said finally, "and because for her, being able to do a thing and not doing it, when the thing matters, when lives depend on it, is not something she can live with." He paused. "Some people are built that way. It's a gift and it costs them everything, and they do it anyway." He started walking. "She's always been that way. The day I met her, she was 19 years old, and she had just done something in a field hospital in Helmand that I will not describe to you. And when I asked her why she did it, she looked at me like I had asked her why she breathed." Webb was quiet. He was thinking about a woman who had come to a military hospital in Baghdad with 2 bags, one with medical supplies and one with things nobody asked about, and had finished rounds this morning after stopping a terrorist attack because the patients didn't stop needing care because the building got complicated. "She told me she's still figuring out how to hold both parts of herself," Webb said. Dawson glanced at him. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing," Webb said. "I didn't have anything worth saying." "No," Dawson said. "Neither do I. And I've known her for 8 years." They walked the rest of the way in silence. Outside, Baghdad was doing what Baghdad did, loud and layered and relentless. The city absorbing what had happened here the way it had absorbed every difficult thing for a very long time, because it had no choice, and neither did the people in it. And in Ward C, Ava Chen finished her rounds. The confirmation came at 11:47 that night. Ava was still in the hospital when it arrived, not because she had nowhere to go, but because she had not yet decided she was ready to leave. She was sitting in the break room off Ward C with a cup of tea she had made 40 minutes ago and not yet touched. And when her phone vibrated on the table, She looked at the screen for a long moment before picking it up. One message, no sender name, a single word in Arabic that translated, roughly, to arrived. She put the phone face down on the table. She picked up the tea. It was cold. She drank it anyway because Samir was alive and in a safe location, and the 6-hour window had held, and that meant she could afford to drink cold tea without it meaning anything other than that she had let it sit too long. She sat with that for a while. The break room was empty. The hospital had quieted, not the quiet of a normal night, but the particular quiet of a building that had been through something and was still processing it, the way a body goes quiet after a fever breaks. There were extra security personnel in the corridors now, Iraqi military, American support, a presence that felt both reassuring and like an admission that something had gone wrong. The staff who had been on duty during the attack were still there, some by choice, some because they hadn't been cleared to leave yet, some simply because they were the kind of people who did not know how to walk away from a place that still needed them. Fatima knocked on the break room door at 5 minutes past midnight. She came in without waiting for an answer, which was so characteristic of her that it made something in Ava's chest loosen slightly. She sat down across the table and looked at Ava with the frank, direct attention she gave to everything. Patients, problems, people who were being complicated when they didn't need to be. "You should sleep," Fatima said. "I know," Ava said, "but you're not going to." "Not yet." Fatima looked at the cold tea. She stood up, took it to the sink, poured it out, and made a fresh cup without asking. She set it in front of Ava and sat back down. "The man they were protecting," she said, "the minister, his aide came by Ward C 2 hours ago. He left something." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Ava looked at it. Her name was written on the front in careful, formal English handwriting. She opened it. Inside was a single note card. 4 lines handwritten in both Arabic and English. She read it once, and then she folded it and put it in her pocket. And her face did the thing it did when something reached her. Not a performance of emotion, but the real thing, quiet and involuntary, visible only in the slight change around her eyes, and the way she held her mouth for about 2 seconds before she brought everything back to neutral. "Good news?" Fatima asked. "He's going home tomorrow," Ava said, "to his daughter." Fatima nodded. She looked at Ava for a moment. "I owe you an apology," she said. Ava looked up. "You don't." "I said I thought I knew who you were, as if knowing who you were in this ward meant I knew everything worth knowing." Fatima shook her head slightly. "That was small of me. I was scared, and I made it about feeling deceived instead of being grateful." She paused. "I am grateful. Fully. All of it." "You held Ward C together," Ava said. "Every patient in that room was safe because of you. Don't minimize that." "I locked a door and told people to get down," Fatima said. "That is exactly what needed to be done," Ava said. "The right action at the right moment is not less valuable because it looks simple." She held Fatima's gaze. "You were the right person in that room. I needed to know that ward was covered so I could move. You covered it. That matters." Fatima was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Will you stay? After all this? They'll give you an out if you want one. No one would blame you." Ava wrapped both hands around the fresh tea. "I have 14 more days on my rotation," she said. "That's not what I asked." Ava looked at her. "I know," she said. "I'm staying." She said it simply and finely, the way she said things that were true and did not require decoration. At 7:15 the next morning, Marcus Webb came back. He was not in tactical gear. He was in civilian clothes, the kind of unremarkable, functional civilian clothes that people in his line of work wore when they were technically off-duty, but never actually off-duty. He came to the front desk and asked for Nurse Chen, and the duty officer, a different one from the morning before, someone who had not been present for any of yesterday, called up to Ward C and told him she was finishing the morning medication round and would be down in 10 minutes. He waited in the corridor. He was not especially good at waiting, but he was practiced at it. She came down in 8 minutes, still in her scrubs, badge clipped to her chest, with the unhurried purposefulness she brought to everything. She saw him, and she stopped for just a beat, not with surprise, but with the look of someone recalibrating for a conversation they had anticipated but not fully scheduled. "You came back," she said. "I have orders," he said. "Commander Garrett wants a formal debrief this morning. I'm supposed to bring you in." He paused. "I told him I'd ask you, not bring you." She looked at him. "There's a difference." "You keep saying that," he said, and there was something in his voice that was not quite a smile but lived near one. "Turns out it keeps being true." She fell into step beside him. They walked out of the building into the morning, which was already hot and bright and entirely indifferent to what had happened the day before, the way Baghdad mornings always were. "How's Torres?" she asked. "Writing the longest after-action report of her career," Webb said. "She's been at it since 5 this morning. She says she keeps having to stop because she doesn't know how to describe you in official language." "Tell her to keep it simple," Ava said. "Civilian asset with relevant prior experience. That covers it." "She used the word extraordinary," Webb said, 4 times. She went back and changed 3 of them and then changed them back. Ava said nothing, but something moved in her expression. The small, complicated movement of a person receiving something they had not asked for and did not entirely know what to do with. The debrief was held in a secure room at the American Military Coordination Center, 3 blocks from the hospital. Not an interrogation. The room was set up as a conference space with a table and chairs and water, and the particular atmosphere of a meeting that everyone in it understood was being recorded and would be read by people who would never be in the same room as any of them. Commander Garrett was already there. He was in his early 50s, rangy and precise, with the face of a man who had spent decades making difficult decisions and had learned to carry them without letting them show too much. He stood up when Ava came in, which Webb noticed and filed away, because Garrett stood up for very few people. "Ms. Chen," he said. "Commander," she said, "sit down, please." He waited until she had. He looked at her across the table with an expression that contained several things at once. Professional assessment, something that might have been apology, and the specific regard of a senior officer for someone whose capabilities have just been demonstrated in conditions that left no room for doubt. "I've been fully briefed on your background," he said, "which means I'm aware that some of what I'm about to say should have been said 6 weeks ago, when you first submitted your intelligence assessment." Ava waited. "The assessment was downgraded by an analyst who did not have the contextual knowledge to evaluate the source correctly," Garrett said. "That was a failure on our part, a significant one." He said it flatly, without hedging. 15 people are alive today who should not be, given the resources and preparation the hostile force brought to this operation. That is entirely because of decisions you made independently, at personal and professional risk, without support from the people who should have been providing it. He paused. "I owe you an acknowledgement of that failure. You have it." The room was very quiet. Webb, sitting against the wall, was watching Ava's face. She received what Garrett had said the same way she received everything, directly, without performance, letting it land where it needed to land. She did not say it was okay. She did not deflect or minimize or do any of the things people did when they were uncomfortable with being acknowledged. She just nodded once, with the clean acceptance of someone who had needed to hear a thing and had heard it. "Thank you," she said. Garrett folded his hands on the table. "I also want to talk about what comes next," he said. "Margaret Hale has made a proposal. I understand she discussed it with you yesterday." "She mentioned a formal role," Ava said. "I'd like to discuss it from my end as well," Garrett said. "Because what you have, the combination of capabilities, the cover, the instinct for operational intelligence, is something that cannot be trained. It exists or it doesn't. And the way you used it yesterday, the judgment, the restraint, the decisions about when to move and when to hold. He stopped. He looked at her directly. I have officers with 20 years of experience who do not have your judgment. I want to be honest about that. Ava looked at the table for a moment, then at Garrett. Can I ask you something? Yes. The analyst who downgraded my assessment, she said. How old was the intelligence community's profile on the network that attacked this facility? Garrett was still for a second. 14 months. The network reorganized 11 months ago, Ava said. New command structure, new funding channel, new operational methodology. The 14-month profile was accurate for a network that no longer existed in that form. She said it without accusation, just the facts, presented clearly. That's not a personal failure by the analyst. That's a structural problem. Current intelligence requires current sources, and current sources require the kind of access that official channels struggle to maintain because official means visible, and visible means compromised. She looked at Garrett steadily. If you bring me in formally, with structure and authorization and a title, you fix some problems and you create others. The access I have right now exists because I am not official. The day I become official, some of those doors close. Garrett looked at her for a long moment. You've thought about this, he said. For a while, she said. What's your answer? My answer is that I want a structure that doesn't require me to stop being what I am, she said. I want the resources and the support and the communications and the extraction capability for myself and for the people who trust me. But I need operational independence. Real independence, not the kind that gets reviewed and overridden by someone sitting in an office who's working from a 14-month-old profile. She leaned forward slightly. I will be accountable. I will report. I will operate within an agreed framework. But I need the framework to be built around what the work actually requires, not around what makes the paperwork easier. Garrett looked at Webb. Webb raised his eyebrows very slightly, which in their long shared vocabulary meant, she's right, and you know it. Garrett looked back at Ava. That's a significant ask, he said. Yesterday was a significant demonstration, she said. He was quiet for a full 10 seconds. Then something in his face resolved. The particular resolution of a man who has been arguing with a conclusion he already knew was correct. I'll take it to Hale, he said, with my recommendation. What's your recommendation? Ava asked. That we say yes, he said simply. The debrief lasted another 40 minutes. Operational details, timeline confirmation, the technical aspects of what had been recovered from the hostile force, and what it indicated about the network's broader capabilities. Ava answered every question with the same direct, organized precision she brought to everything. She gave them what they needed. She flagged what she was not prepared to disclose until the structural conversation was resolved. She did it without apology and without aggression, with the calm authority of someone who understood exactly what she was worth and had stopped pretending otherwise. When it was done, Webb walked her out. They stood on the street for a moment in the morning heat. Inside the building, things were already in motion. Calls being made, assessments being revised, a proposal being drafted that would, if it moved through the right people in the right sequence, give Ava Chen something she had been operating without for years. How do you feel? Webb asked. She looked at him with a slight expression of surprise. Not because the question was inappropriate, but because it was the question that people in her world rarely asked, and she was not sure she had a ready answer. She thought about it honestly. Tired, she said, and okay, both at the same time. That tracks, he said. She looked down the street. I need to get back to the hospital, she said. I know, he paused. Torres wants to buy you coffee. When you're ready, no agenda, no debrief, just coffee. Tell her I'd like that, Ava said. Reyes wants to know if you'd be willing to consult on medical training for the team, Webb said. Combat medicine. He says the gap between our standard training and what you were doing yesterday in that ward is, his word, embarrassing. Tell him to send me a curriculum outline, she said. I'll tell him what to add. Webb nodded. Then he said, with the quiet difficulty of a man who had been working up to something for the past hour, I want to ask you one more thing, and you don't have to answer. Ask, she said. The day you arrived, he said, you came in with 2 bags. One was medical supplies. The other one, you never told anyone what was in it. She looked at him. Her expression was steady and slightly warm and entirely honest. Personal items, she said. A photograph, a letter I've been carrying for 3 years and not sent. A book I've been reading for 2 years and not finished. She paused. And a small toolkit for installing things in places where people aren't supposed to install things. He stared at her. The rifle was already in the shaft, she said. The bag was for the secondary items. The flashbang, the comms unit I used to listen to their channel before your jammer went down. She paused. I didn't bring a weapon into the building, Webb. I brought tools. The weapon was here before I arrived. He processed that. You pre-shipped it. I sent it through the right channels, she said. The channels that Garrett and Hale and Dawson don't officially know about, but that function because everyone involved understands what they're for. She held his gaze. I was not reckless. I was prepared. I need you to understand the difference. I do, he said, and he meant it. Not because he was required to accept it, but because he had watched her operate for 24 hours now, and he understood, in a way that was difficult to articulate, but impossible to dismiss, that recklessness and Ava Chen did not occupy the same space. Everything she did was calculated. Everything she risked, she had already weighed. The preparation was not paranoia. It was the expression of someone who took seriously the possibility of being needed and had decided, a long time ago, that being needed and being unprepared was a failure she was not willing to accept. Go back to your ward, he said. Take care of your patients. That's the plan, she said. She turned and walked back toward Al-Rashid. He watched her go, this woman in blue scrubs with a hospital badge and the walk of someone who had never fully come home from a war and had decided, somewhere along the way, to make the distance between home and the front line the place where she lived her life. Not because she had no choice, because she had looked at all her choices and decided this one was the one she could live with. The one that let her be everything she was at the same time, without having to cut any of it away. He watched her until she went through the door. Then he went back inside and sat down at the table across from Garrett. And Garrett looked at him, and Webb said, "Say yes to everything she asked for." Garrett looked at him for a moment. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of a recommendation in my career," Webb said, "and you know I don't say that." Garrett nodded slowly. He picked up his phone. 3 weeks later, Ava finished her rotation at Al-Rashid Military Medical Center. She left the same way she arrived, quietly, efficiently, with 2 bags and a small smile that didn't ask for anything. She said goodbye to every patient she had cared for, by name, with the specific and personal attention that had made her, in 3 weeks plus the day everything changed, one of the most trusted people in the ward. She said goodbye to Fatima last. They stood in the corridor outside Ward C, and Fatima hugged her, which was not something Fatima did lightly, and Ava let herself be held for a moment, a real moment, not a brief one, with the full weight of what had passed between them present in it. "Where next?" Fatima asked. "I don't know yet," Ava said. "Somewhere that needs what I have." "That's everywhere," Fatima said. "Yes," Ava said, "it is." She walked out of the building into the Baghdad afternoon. Her phone was in her pocket. In it were 3 messages, one from Dawson, one from Garrett, and one from a number with no name attached that she had received 30 minutes ago and had not opened yet. She knew what it was. She had been expecting it for 2 days, which did not make it easier to read. She sat down on a low wall outside the entrance, in the full sun, and opened it. It was from Samir, 3 lines, in Arabic. She translated them the way she always did, Not word by word, but as a whole thing, the way meaning actually traveled between languages when the person who wrote it was writing from somewhere real. He said he was safe. He said his daughters were with him. He said that he had spent 40 years believing that the most dangerous people in the world were the ones with the most power, and that in the past 3 weeks he had revised that belief, because the most dangerous person he had ever encountered was a woman who used her power only when there was no other way, and that this was a distinction he would spend the rest of his life trying to understand. Ava read it twice. She put her phone in her pocket. She sat in the sun for another minute, letting it be what it was. Not a victory, not a resolution, but a moment of genuine good in a world that required a great deal of difficult work to produce such moments, and produce them anyway, and would keep producing them as long as there were people willing to do the work. Then she picked up her bags. She stood up. She walked toward the car that was waiting to take her to wherever came next, carrying everything she was, the nurse and the Marine, and the woman who had never found a way to be only one thing. And she carried it without apology and without performance, the way she had always carried it, the way she would carry it for as long as she was needed. And Ava Chen was always needed.